Hey there, this is Peter Levin, Managing Director of Griffin Gaming Partners and Chairman of Immortals Gaming Club. I'm here today talking to the one and only Danny Bilson, Director of USC Games, accomplished screenwriter, known for such credits such as Rocketeer, the film, the original Flash television series, responsible for such games franchises at EA, such as James Bond, the Harry Potter franchise, the co-producer of Sims, Medal of Honor. So as a former senior executive at both EA and THQ, and also responsible for writing the upcoming Spike Lee directed Five Bloods. So we're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff today, touching on games and media and the cross-section of the two. But most importantly, Danny, what are you playing right now?
In the quarantine phase, I've got a posse in Red Dead Online, and we ride a few nights a week, which is interesting. I play a lot of NBA 2K because I'm sports starved, and season got cut off in the middle. I actually play a really hardcore baseball sim called,
Which one?
Out of the Park 21.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, love it. I'm even playing the online game. So right now, those are my mains, and I play, I get a couple hours a day, and I have sampled where you're living, though, in Call of Duty.
Warzone?
Warzone. I went in there the other night, ran through the tutorial, so I'm about ready to squad up, so
just let me know. We have to drag Dean along for his W because he keeps coming up the bridesmaid. Our squad got our 10th W last night, and I'm absolute dead weight. So we should put together a mod squad and get after it together for sure.
I mean, one thing we can talk about right off the bat, because we just landed there just on what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
is what we're doing right now, how we're adapting to online at school, which for the game school has been fairly smooth. It's not easy, it's difficult, but where we're going is people in isolation need ways to connect. And our business is, we haven't seen all the numbers yet, but we know what's going on, right? We're seeing from Animal Crossing to Call of Duty Battle Royale game to a lot of the other online games. It's no coincidence that I don't think that Rockstar is going to put Red Dead Online on Xbox Game Pass in a couple of weeks, right?
No, I mean, when you just simply look at the number, 2 billion plus hours of content streamed on Twitch during the pandemic,
So I think this is really important. I think it's important for us, us as game makers, game consumers. I mean, educators are a certain thing that we take everything from both and try to raise the bar. But on that note, we're looking very seriously at how games connect people who are in isolation. We even have something going on. We've had it going on for a few weeks already. It's national, called a Zoom Jam, where we've got game designers designing mostly on paper because it's just rule sets of ways to play on Zoom. So this whole idea of where we're headed in the next couple of years, and Peter, when we started planning this wasn't a topic, right? But
yeah, we knew we were going to go down rabbit holes, Danny. So
yeah, but this is a huge topic for us right now. Is what does entertainment production, entertainment content look like for the next few years? Maybe
and most importantly, the through line there being, what does storytelling look like, right?
Absolutely. And we'll definitely loop back there because it's all stories. Everything is a story. I mean, my theories and the stuff I teach and talk about games it's very different than the scripted content from film. That's sort of I've been teaching this class for about 15 years at USC. Even when I was an executive, I would teach it at night. And the basic idea of the class was, I've been a screenwriter for 20 years. Now I'm in game design. What do we take from traditional storytelling into games, and what do we leave behind? Or what do we take from screenwriting? What do we leave behind? That's something that I've been working on for many, many years. It's not exactly work. It's almost like a filter. Stuff just passes through. And what do we keep over here and what do we take? But what I do say, and one of the projects I've been involved in for the last 3 or 4 years with a couple of my associates and a lot of industry folks, is a program we run for Tencent from China, where they come over here. And it's mostly around IP development, certain production processes, not super technical, but it's mostly creative. And I always find myself saying, under all the sort of the firestorm of questions, hey, a story is a story is a story. And the basic rules of storytelling, from people around the campfires in the Middle Ages to the emergent narrative beats that you're encountering in your Call of Duty game, have a connection, right? And designers are creating memorable moments in games that sometimes it's not linear, but they create stories that we tell each other after we play. And that's one of my main things that I think is really important about stories in games or interactive, is the most important stories are the ones the players tell each other afterwards, not the ones the designers write. Unless we're talking about a super like story game, like a Telltale game or something like that. But almost every other game, the best stories are the ones the player tells each other the next day after they were playing last night. And that's something and cultivating that, it's not haphazard, right? It's narrative design. And we can, and there's tactics to that and skills, and it's an evolving art form. But the first thing
I'm going to jump in, because you play Red Dead. I spent my last Christmas holiday before that was like a month straight of Red Dead, and what they've done so brilliantly, and actually I think Warzone and Activision Blizzard has done a phenomenal job this time around as well, which is this escapist fare, the ability to create this environment, this metaverse, within which you can create your own universe, right? That's contextual, that you can invite people into, that, to your point, you can create on top of. But this metaverse theme is absolutely exploding because of what we're currently going through, right? There's not, for the last few days, all you've heard about is what Travis Scott is doing within Fortnite, right? You just cannot escape it, whether it's Zoom backgrounds, whether it's our own children or relatives or friends' children. It's all over social media. I mean, it was a coup for Epic, brilliantly executed. But this notion of metaverse and the storytelling that gets woven through it, where does that land with you?
It really, 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 you just kind of summarized exactly what I was talking about, which is the most important stories are the ones we tell each other, right? But they don't, again, I started to say it, they don't come from nowhere.
Yeah.
So first is the world. Let's talk about that, because I think if we want to get and be informative in some ways, one of the big difference in looking at stories and I'll use games just because it's an easy word, in interactive content or games, is in film. If you go over to the film school in the screenwriting department, they'll tell you character first. And that's one of their theories, right? Develop the character and the story comes from that. As a screenwriter, I kind of balance it both ways. But in games, it's world first. It's world first. There's an old, from '96 Microsoft ad campaign that I still use all the time as a teaching tool. And it's called, you'll remember it, it was, "Where do you want to go today?"
Yeah, sure.
That was their catchphrase. For me, it was the most evocative statement about our art form that I've ever heard, and it's the most inspirational, and I use it to this day, and I use it with my students, and I use it in my own brain when I'm creating things. So first thing is world, because I don't know about you, but when I look at a game, we can talk about the two games we're playing, right? First thing I think about is, do I want to go into a modern war zone, right, with some awesome gear and great rule sets and a lot of fun, and we know how good the feel of the weapons are in those games? Or do I want to go ride a horse with 6 other pals in the West? Now, that has nothing to do with the story or the characters or anything. That's just, where do we want to go play, right? And what's awesome about what we do is we don't just play, our play is creative at the same time, because in order to own our experiences, we're making choices, creating things, and sharing them with our friends, like you are with your friends at night, and I am with my friends at night right now, creates the key narrative, which is certainly secondary to whatever the narrative was that the designers did. But I mean, I can give you an example. The example I use of this kind of emergent narrative and design is a really old one, but it's really effective. It goes all the way back to EverQuest, which I think was a milestone game. Yep. EverQuest for me was a milestone game. And I'll tell this quickly, I guess, but In 1999, when that game came out, my writing partner and I lost about a year of productivity. We had a deal at Paramount, but we had 2 computers across desks, and we were lost in EverQuest, which is a very punishing game if you remember, because if you died, all your loot would drop where you were, and you'd have to run like naked to get it. I'm trying to be quick with this, but
it was a grind.
It was a grind. What happened was Paul fell. There was a well in a dungeon in a room, and he fell down the hole in this well. This is really interesting. And I could get up there and look down, and he's like 4 levels down. And the way this thing was designed, and I've never really seen anything like this since, maybe it goes back to paper stuff, was that each level had a different level of mobs down there, different monsters. So he was a level 13, but where he landed, they were level 35s, and there was no way he could get out of there, right, without getting killed. And then his loot drops, and how the hell were we going to go down there with our 2 level 13 dwarves and get past all those monsters and rescue him? And right when this happened, we had to leave the office because it was my daughter's high school graduation party. And there was 150 people in the backyard. And the point of this whole story is, by the end of that party, I had about 100 people engage in the narrative of how we were going to get this dwarf out of the well. Well, do you have a grappling hook? No, not in the game. Do we have this and that and this and that? And to me, it was the most powerful example of game storytelling. And I'm still telling it 20 years later.
Sure.
Because I lit up an entire backyard garden party we were desperate to get him out of that well, and people engaged in that story. Now, what did those designers write? I mean, I guess they put a well in the middle of a room, and there was no collision. You could fall through, and you could fall through multiple levels down. Now, I have no clue if it was how well tested it was, if they had other subjects have this experience that Paul and I had. I have no clue, because these are early days. This is like 1999. The game had been live for maybe, when we hit that, it would probably been live for about 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So, but that story to me is emblematic of the kind of stories that matter to me.
I got 2 questions for you. One, what did happen? What was the result? Because you can't leave us hanging like that. 2, I'm going to question your priorities of leaving the office for your daughter's high school graduation and leaving your pal down a well fighting level 35 monsters when he's only a level 13 dwarf.
So, you know what's funny, man, is I tell this story in my writing class, my game writing class, right? And I always get to the end of the story and I say, none of you are going to ask me what happened. They never asked. You're the first person, because you're a gamer, hardcore, who wants to know how we got out of there.
Yeah, I do, actually. So what happened?
Another party of level 35s came through, found him, and escorted him out.
Wow.
It was awesome. It was awesome.
So I have to believe, just because of how early on the spectrum EverQuest was, and you know, they had no idea what they had done at the time, right? Because they really did, you know, set the stage for so much of the fare that we have, you know, so lovingly consumed over the past couple of decades. But it, you know, I do wonder whether or not that was A, by design, or, you know, B, simply just, you know, 1 or 2 of the schmuck insurance things that happens at that stage of a game. You know, they fixed that later, but it'd be fun to revisit it. You could actually probably go back and revisit and see what they have done with that exact geography.
You know, what's really interesting, and I think it has to do with why World of Warcraft Classic is so interesting, is you've experienced this. I've experienced this because we've been playing games a long time.
Yeah.
We actually have nostalgia for virtual spaces. I do, right? So to your point, if I went into EverQuest and it was I could run it on a machine and go run around some of that geometry, it would have a lot of nostalgia, and I would remember things that happened, especially Banned in Freeport. Paul and I had this for 20 years. We took something that happened to us and we would use it as an expression in our language, which was Banned in Freeport, because we went up to this Freeport, there was a guard, we killed him, and we didn't realize it was going to break our faction, and we could never get into the main town. Because remember, this is an early game and was really punishing. So we had this language, we were banned in Freeport. Okay, so we've talked about EverQuest a lot, and I think we've talked about it a lot because it was one of the early games that fomented so much emergent narrative in 3D space, in multiplayer 3D space. And it was powerful, and it's important, and I think it belongs on an important list of inventions in gaming.
Sorry, I had to pull up my nostalgia. These are our offices in Santa Monica with my old school arcade games. When you're talking about nostalgia. So I do want to ask, relative to this notion of, you know, people finding these environments within which to connect, right? And there's also this phenomenon too. You talk about baseball being a passion and missing sport. So, you know, there are folks who will, at night, they'll engage in their Red Dead or their Warzone or their Fortnite, but they'll also engage on the World Golf Tour app so that they can play against their buddies, their golf club buddies that they can no longer play against. Or NBA 2K, or tune into NBC, Sports Network and watch virtual Formula One racing, right? Or NBA players playing NBA or FIFA or Madden or the whatnot. So the interesting thing is, it's almost like what we used to call day part consumption of television. There's now, kind of day part consumption or genre consumption of different types of interactive software. So it's Animal Crossing for some folks like myself on the more casual, relaxing side, and then ramping all the way up to Warzone. There is this phenomenon, but then nostalgia, because you brought it up, plays another key part, which is you hear a lot, and there's been a lot written about anecdotally of, kids coming home from college who used to play Minecraft or used to play Roblox are now going back to those platforms to re-engage or engage with their friends or their girlfriends,
Yeah, I'll bet a lot of panels talked about this, so we don't have to go hard on it, but I'm playing Animal Crossing too, but I'm an old Animal Crossing fan, like from the game, not the Japanese one, from the GameCube one.
Yeah.
And I totally understand it. We all understand it. It's comfort food. It's a safe place. It's under our control in a world that's not under our control. And we could talk about, I'm sure other panels have talked about all the great design stuff there. I think for me and you, what's really interesting, Peter, is that both of us are passionately interested in people gathering online in virtual space, but in curated, crafted experiences, right? And that topic, we talked about 1999 for a long time, but you and I, especially you, both of our jobs is to look forward, right? Is to look out. And the idea, I've believed in this sort of virtual theme park thing since my very first game pitch to Don Matrick when I met him back in the day. And I believed, and we used to call them persistent state worlds back then, PSWs, remember?
Yeah,
That was, but these themed worlds where we can have really solid fun mechanics, tight progression, right? I'm not talking about virtual reality. I'm not talking about Westworld or some fantasy of that. I'm talking about great online games. That's what I'm talking about, where the systems are tight for us to function and feel ownership and create stories in our head. And those narrative designers have put the right props. And more than anything else, the live team is running this thing like the cast at Disneyland. That's a dream for me, right? Is when whether the live team is machine learning or it's humans or a combo or whatever it is, when that sort of game master D&D thing becomes all physicalized and there's humanity on the creative side, as long as humanity on the consumption side, and it's going to be supported by machine learning and bot. We know that, right? Because of the scale. But that's the kind of storytelling that I know gets you and I both excited. It's why we started talking a lot. And what that means for entertainment in the planet. You mentioned Travis Scott's, animating and streaming a single in Fortnite, right?
Yep.
Perfect timing, great marketing tool. Don't know how hard of a production gag that is because I haven't done it. I don't know. I don't imagine it's that hard, especially if they have the tools at Epic to do that. They've done it for a while now.
Lived through it with them with the John Wick integration, and they're nothing short of brilliant with what they do, and they do spend the cycles, and they do appreciate all the subtlety and nuance that you're talking about. The brand equity and being genuine to both audiences. So I do think to your point, because the VR thing, for you and I talked about this before, but the thing that always lacked was it's antisocial and it's not repeatable. And these are two things that have to exist within any kind of a game environment, let alone a persistent game environment where you want to be able to get back to that environment and have repeatable experiences and make it as social as humanly possible.
Right. And I think to talk about business for one sec, this all dovetails with free to play in my mind, right? It's for it to expand and scale and grow. We have to be able to give the most people the opportunity to engage, and then have really, I'm going to use the word fun monetization systems. And what a fun monetization system is to me, it's when I feel pretty good about spending the $3 or the $5, right? I don't feel the designers are putting me in a corner and forcing me to do it. It's a positive consumer choice. And I think that's a design and a narrative design skill too, to support how those loops work so that they feel right to the consumer, so they feel like they're paying for value. And that, we can't talk about storytelling in our art form without talking about how we're going to fund it, right? And I am a big believer in, and you see it, what's interesting to me is Rockstar, because they've always had enough revenue to call their own shots and to take risks, right? Red Dead was a risk, right? Marketing would say a Western. This whole generation of kids doesn't even know what a Western is, right? But the Housers said, I won't use foul language. We don't care. We think it's awesome. We're inspired to do it. We're inspired by those films. We want to bring that to everybody. And what do those kids get who never saw a Western? A fresh world that has fantastic thematic consistency because it's not made up. It's based on 50 years of Westerns or 70, 80 years of Westerns.
Yeah, but to that point, right, because it's like the Jim Cameron analogy, right? He never would have been able to make Avatar if he didn't do what he did with the Titanic when everyone laughed him out of the room, and he was able to capture all those economics because he believed in himself. These are guys who did it with GTA, and they're like, you know what? F you, this is something we're doing, and we know how to do it, and we executed, at a level that the genre had never seen before, the Western genre.
So you're hitting on a really important point that I think has to be preserved as we move forward in this art form. And that is the inspiration that comes from the human heart of an individual. And as we add in machine learning and systems to help us with storytelling and customize story a little bit more to what you would like versus what I would like and custom delivered, still the biggest hits, the disruptions that come in our industry that are story-based are risky bets. And I'm going to go back. I teach this. Star Wars tested like crap. They were terrified of it. Titanic, they were terrified of it. Avatar, they didn't know what the hell it was, right? But the consumer, it always wants fresh. And if you can have all the traditions of quality storytelling, and these can go to games as long as you understand how to deliver them, right? The traditions of quality storytelling in a new world. We'll go back to where we were at the beginning, because all those films invited the audience to a world they hadn't experienced before. You hadn't ridden on the Titanic. What Cameron did was so amazing. It's an experiential film. There aren't that many of those, but that's one. I can name another one. Schindler's List is an experiential film. Apocalypse Now is an experiential film. These are films that are really immersive. It's like, shit, I was there. And there's a lot of risk in every single one of those, but with those risks, just like a game system, bigger the risk, the bigger the reward. So those are the disruptions, the narrative disruptions to our storytelling that I see. And they're always pushing a boulder, going against the curve. But what they do have in their toolkit is all the traditions of great storytelling. Every single one of those. Star Wars is, I don't know who would argue with this. Star Wars is successful. The core success is the Force. It's darkness and light. It's something that every human being can relate to. So Titanic, it's the love story. It's the haves and have-nots love story that's so relatable. And of course, Avatar is, colonialism and all that stuff, right? So the themes are ones we understand. And this is important in all narrative design. Themes we can relate to, and but take us to new places and new worlds and be imaginative. When I started teaching game writing, it was, please give me anything except Space Marines and Men in Tights. Because back when I started, that's all there was. I want to drop one little comment, Peter, and then I'm going to throw this back to you, which is just, I've summarized a lot of my thinking because I'm an academic now and I have to do stuff like that because someday I might have to write something other than a script, like a textbook. But there's two things that matter in narrative design to me. Why will they care? And that's usually, there's a lot of ways to make them care. And in games, progression and formulating goals is the way to care. It just doesn't have to be save the baby. You know what I mean? It's not the same tools. And is it surprising? Moment to moment, every moment should be, wow, I didn't expect that. Because when an audience expects the moment, they're out. How many times have you sat with somebody or your wife or somebody and watched a movie? She goes, oh, I know what's going to happen next. And the whole thing just goes bleh, like that. So surprise and engagement, why are they going to care about it? And like I said, games have multiple ways of making people care that screenplays don't, because a lot of reasons I care is because I just want to get that. I just want that gun. I just want that hat. Or I'm sorry, I'm not going to bed until we take over that fort. You know what I mean? Or that homestead. So you can tell that I love games and I love playing them because I get all excited about this. And that actually is the engine that keeps me going, is my love of games.
So I have a practical question, just because so many people out there, have university aged kids. they're living through very anxious, stressful times. You and I talked about this a little bit offline, but I think it's important to share someone from your orientation. You are dealing with a native digital industry, right? It's an industry that will and has responded well to remote learning, remote execution. But psychologically, that's still rough, in particular for your kids that are aging out and they're going out into the real world. How are you guys dealing with that fallout? I know you and Jim are very high touch, with your students. You guys have built something unprecedented globally with that school, and I've had the honor and privilege of co-teaching there and guest lecturing, and it's nothing short of breathtaking. Really, I'm not just saying that, present company taken into consideration. But how is it that you guys are managing that with your students?
First of all, it's really hard. And as everybody knows who's Zooming every day, the fatigue's really hard. Just this system, it's a great system. It works wonderfully, but 7 or 8 hours of it, we all operate at burnout. Doesn't matter what you're doing. But I will say that, and the class of 20 is a particularly difficult problem, right? Because they don't get a graduation ceremony right now, and they're going into a world. But I'm going to tell you something really positive. USC Games, the joint program with Viterbi Engineering and Cinema, we're about 400, about 450 with faculty, split engineers and designers and artists. Well, the world that these students are going to go into in the next couple of years is going to be the same distributed development we slip right into in March. And first of all, our faculty at USC are 95% industry veterans, right? You're talking to everybody shipped games, and everybody understands distributed development, and none of us have been out of the business that long to where we don't, right? So what I see is more distributed development, because the next couple of years are going to force it. And I used to run studio. Who wants to pay overhead on a studio when you can work remotely and safely in a pandemic? So what we're telling these students right now, first of all, what they're doing is we're having the USC Games Expo on May 12th online, and we are shipping, for us, 80 games. And we did not miss a beat when we went home, because our art form ports online beautifully. It's stressful, it's hard for the kids, but our game directors, frankly, are well trained. And I just told them yesterday, I honor them for holding 12 large teams together, going home to different parts of the world even, and they're still finishing and polishing and debugging their games. And what we're telling them is, you're going to graduate and your first jobs are going to be exactly like this. You're going to be working remotely for the next few years probably, and you'll be able to say, I just did it for 3 months at USC. I kind of get this. And then you'll fit into their plan. And I think that's an advantage for our kids. But I can't take credit for this. The students deserve credit for this. Because I'm doing this right now, right? Because we're ramping up for this big expo on the 12th. It's going to be about 4 hours online.
And Dana, I don't mean it, but we're getting the hook here.
Okay.
I do want to end on that super positive note, because I think it's a wonderful thing that you guys are doing, and it's wonderful to hear, the way that you're both giving the kids credit for that, but also kind of herding them towards this and making them aware of the fact that they've actually been doing it.
Yeah, I would say that our division is exemplary right now, because digital is native to us. We already understood the tools, and we're managing our way through.
Well, I got through like an nth of what we're going to dive into here. So hopefully we can do round 2 or 3. I could talk to you forever. But maybe we'll squad up. I'll get after some Red Dead. I'll drag you into some Warzone. We can get after it. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, GamesBeat.
Thanks, GamesBeat.